Welcome to lesson 12. In this lesson, we get a bonus plugin to develop, which was not originally meant to be in the course, but because we've got a bit of time in this lesson, we're going to develop a radio buttons custom course field. After which, we'll do a roundup of the course, and we will look at plugins that we have not covered in the course and potential plugin development that might come your way. After that, we'll talk about publishing or releasing your plugin to the Moodle plugins directory, and then we'll look at a couple of very useful forums that I would suggest you join and follow: Moodle Jobs and the Moodle Developer Forum. So let's have a look at what course custom fields are. So if I come across here and we'll use our banner topics course and I edit the settings, if your site has course custom fields defined, you would get another section at the bottom here where you could actually use the custom fields. So how do you create custom fields? If you go to site admin, go to courses, manage, go to course custom fields, we can then create and define. They have to be in a category, so normally that's the default, other fields, and then you add a custom fields. So custom fields, you can add checkbox, date and time, drop down menu, short text, text area. Note there's no radio button one, and that's what we're going to do. We are going to develop a radio button one to add to this. But in the meantime, let's take our checkbox and examination course EX1 is an examination course, right? And then we come down here, required. We can make it required, but it doesn't make sense with a checkbox. No, doesn't make sense to do unique data with a checkbox because there's no ways it can be unique. Check by default, no. Locked and whatever, and we save those changes. Now if we go back to our course, our banner topics course, and edit settings again, when we come down here, we'll find the other fields, and this is where your custom fields will appear. So it's a way of adding more data to a course. Now the use of the limited in the sense that the Moodle core itself doesn't quite use custom fields as such, but you can use them for things like reporting and for developing plugins to do different things, etc. So there is a use for them, and I've seen just about every Moodle I've come across has some defined custom fields for some reason or another. So we're going to develop the radio button one, as I said. But before we go and do that, I want to show you something else. There's a similar concept for user profile fields. So if you go to users and we look at user profile fields, you see there's a new category for other categories. You can create a new profile, and there's checkbox, date, time, drop down menu. Not quite sure what social is. That might be a forum of some sort. Text area and text input. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our plugin development. Right, custom fields live in the custom field folder in field, and we'll create our new field here, folder, and we'll call it radio, and we'll do the language files at the language directories at the same time, and then we'll start by, as usual, with our version PHP file. So our usual stuff at the top, and our three properties defined as usual, with our custom name, our component name as custom field underscore radio. Okay, let's do the language file. Custom field underscore radio PHP. And this is it with the required string definition for our plugin name. So what else do we require? Well, if we quickly check our checkbox custom field, you'll notice it's only version in the main folder, and everything is the functionality seems to be defined in 2 class files in the classes folder. So we'll have to go ahead and create our own files. So let's do that. So we'll go back to our radio folder, and we'll create a new folder called classes, and we'll start with the data controller file. So, okay, and this is what it looks like. We namespaces auto loading, and the class name the same as the file name for auto loading to work, and we are extending core custom field data controller. It's empty for now, and let's do our other file. Our other file is field controller PHP, and this is our file here. Custom field radio again in our namespace, field controller the same name as the file, and we're extending core custom field controller in this class. Okay, so with these 4 files, we can actually install our plugin. So let's do that. So let's log in, and we'll install it. Now if we try and see whether we can add a custom, can we actually use it at this moment in time? We can try custom field, and if we go here, we've got our radio button, but when we click on it, nothing happens. So nothing happens. We need to go and define some functionality. So let's go and do that. So back in our code, let's start with this field controller file. Okay, this is our file. Now the field controller one is for the admin. It's for the admin side of things, and then your data controller is for what the user uses when they create the course or edit the course. So we still same as usual at the top as we had earlier. So we have to define a constant type, which is radio, and then we add fields for editing a radio field in admin in the config form definition method, and we get passed in a form. So we're going to add some fields to the form. So we've got some headings there. We have added a text, and the name of your fields, your elements, need to be config data, and then so it's like an array of config data. So config question needs to be defined as a config data, and we need some strings. So we've got a text for a question, and we set the usual stuff, type, rules, etc. And we have here's another example of us using create element to create a group. So we've got a radio array, we create an element, we create an element there, and we then add the element, the array to a group, add the group to the form, and we set the default for config data at no. Okay, so that's the definition, and then we do have the opportunity to validate the data that's being sent through when a user uses that. So we're going to call the config form validation, and we get the usual thing that happens with validation. We get the data and we get the files array being passed through. Okay, and then we call the parent to ensure that the parent has an opportunity to validate any other fields, and then which we know they are, because we know there's fields that are defined outside of our custom our outside of our settings up here. Okay, and then in fact we are using it here. We're making sure the user has not selected unique values for the radio buttons, because there's only two answers, yes or no, and it can't therefore be unique. And then we return errors like we do with normal validation in forms. So that will setting it like this will mean the form will be redisplayed and the error will show at the unique values field. Okay, right, so that's our field controller. So let's turn our attention to our data controller. So again, still the same up to here, and then what we've got now, we've got a function data field in which we are returning a string called int value. Now what is that? Let's have a look. So this is the table in which the custom data is stored. As you can see in my database, custom field data. Okay, and this is the table that's where the data will be stored. And what we've got in there is field ID, which relates to the field, the instant ID, the one that's being stored against the course, or against the course. And then we have these funny things: int value, dec value, short char, char value, value, and value format. Now all these are about storing the actual value of the custom field. So we returned int value because we expect an integer as the value for our course custom course field, but you can have dec value, short char value, so up to 255, up to 133, value which is long text, and then the format of that value, the value format. So those are the fields that will store the data for your custom field. Then there's the obvious stuff like the time created and what have you, which we don't have to worry about. That's dealt with by the course functionality. Okay. So for more information, you can always come to the documentation page. The link will be in the lesson. And if I look down here are the values that can be set, and it explains what each one of them and whether they index or not. So we just return, as we did, our int value. So let's go back to our code. It's a useful page to have a look at. It's very short, not too difficult, and very much easy to use. Okay, so let's go back to our code. So back in our code, okay, we've returned the int value. We then have an instance form definition, and very similar to the field controller, we get given a form to work with. Okay, so in this function we get the field, whatever the field happens to be, and then we get the configuration data for our field. Okay, and then we get the form element name. So we've got these three functions here to set ourselves up to use to create the form. So we start with an array, defining an array and adding in the two radio button elements, or adding it to a group, and setting the default and setting the type. So the default will be whatever has been set as the configuration default from our field controller, and adding that to our field. Okay, and then we have another function we need to override, get default value, which is null. And then we have another function called export value, which basically returns the value in human readable format. So this is building up a form based on what we defined in the field controller. Let's do the strings first. So these are our strings that we set for our two files, field controller and data controller. And now we can upgrade our version and actually go see this in action in Moodle. So let's do that, save that, and go to Moodle. So we'll just log in as admin, upgrade, Then let's go and set it as a course custom field. So let's add a new custom field. Our radio button's still there. Now we get something. Okay, so let's just call this short name is a PC1. Oh, in fact, I don't think I need that. Hold on. So we have, our question is here, is this a practical course? So you could see we could use that for our practical course grader. We could have had it checking for the fact that it is actually a practical course to set the grade. So we'll leave the default answer to no, and let's just put something in there and see if it actually does appear anywhere else on the form. So let's save that. If we go back to our course, Banner Topics course, edit the settings and go down to other fields, we now have is this a practical course? So if I hadn't put the blah 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 in, that would have been blank, and we would have just had, is this a practical course, yes or no? And we can set that to yes and save. And that basically is our course custom field. Now remember, you've got the user profile field, which is the same, but they don't use the same code. So they actually created and managed separately, but the principle is exactly the same. So that's it for this plugin. Let's move on with the lesson. So as a roundup, let's look at what we've covered in this course. So we've covered about 19 of the 55 or so APIs available in Moodle presently. And there's a handout in this lesson listing all 55 of them. So the ones we've touched on are these ones on the screen, and a lot of them are used quite widely. So for example, Access API, that's always going to be nearly every single plugin. You'll have to define some kind of Access API. The admin settings, if you want settings for your plugin, you definitely will use the data manipulation API quite often, if not all the time. The events API useful for logging. Your file API if you're working with files. Form API, I'd be surprised if you never have to use Form API in any kind of plugin that you develop. The Moodle lib is the Swiss knife of APIs, so you are going to be using functionality from there all the time. And then you've got your output-based APIs like Output API, the Page API, your Navigation API. We've touched the Privacy API is starting to show up. I think even with third-party plugins, you need to do something in terms of providing privacy settings. Your String API you'll use all the time, and you've got useful ones like your Task API for scheduled tasks. So I think in all, I think we've really touched on the really big important APIs in this course. In terms of plugins, we've done 12 plugins out of the 58, and we'll look at the others in a little while. Some of them you'll never have to touch, others may be more common. So let's look at what we did. We did an assignment feedback plugin in lesson 7. We did an authentication plugin in lesson 2. We did a block plugin in lesson 3, a course custom field plugin in this lesson, lesson 12, a course format plugin in lesson 5. We did a resource course module in lessons 10 and 11. We did a data format plugin in lesson 8, enrollment plugin in lesson 6, external service plugin when we were looking at web services, etc., in lesson 8. We did a local plugin, which was like consuming web services, doing web services in reverse, in lesson 9. We did a repository plugin as well in lesson 9, and we did a report plugin in lesson 4. And I think a lot of these are ones that you're likely to meet regularly. Okay, there are a few more that I believe will start to become more important as time goes on. So these are the ones I think, apart from the ones we've done in this course, that you are likely to be approached to do or be asked to do if you are employed. Now, I have not touched on themes in this course. I'm not a Moodle theme developer at all. I avoid, well, I don't take on any work to do with themes unless it's very minor changes. That is an area that gets a lot of attention by people especially people who are starting out with Moodle. However, apart from themes, we've got things like assignment submission plugins to go alongside the assignment feedback plugins, gradebook import and export, as we did with our practical grader. There's lots of reasons why these kind of plugins will become more and more important as more and more tools come onto the market, and you have to integrate them in some way, shape or form. Gradebooks is the main way people keep track of progress, student progress. Then LTI services and sources. LTI, a way of sharing resources between different LMSs or different applications. LTI is a recent introduction to Moodle. I remember playing with LTI some years before they actually started to think about bringing it into Moodle. And before that, it was an extension, it was a plugin, and then they've brought it into the core. It's interesting to see how they've actually integrated LTI. And I'd like to spend some more time looking at it, because I sometimes feel it's a little bit convoluted for what it needs to do. But anyway, then you got plagiarism with the rise of people offering services to write essays and do submissions for especially university level pupils and stuff. This is going to become quite interesting. Portfolio, for people to be able to take and show the competencies outside of your LMS. So external portfolio services like XAPI, badges, open badges, etc. Then you got question types, always something that will be of interest, because obviously to keep the students' attention and motivation, it's always interesting that you come up with ideas to make it a little bit more exciting for them to learn, etc. So that area, I think, may actually continue to grow. And in fact, one of the later additions of plugins has to do with actually creating activities for students. We'll look at that in a short while. And then there's admin tools, various admin tools. As people move to the cloud and start doing stuff in the cloud, I think there will be more need for tools, admin tools, to help people administer the cloud instances. Okay, so these are ones I feel, apart from the ones we've done in the course, are likely to be things that are going to grow in the future and become more important. So now let's just look at the other plugins that are available. So all the links for all the pages we're going to look at in this next section of the lesson will be in the lesson. This is the plugin types page, which lists all the plugin types that are available in Moodle. They start off like it in alphabetical order, and then it kind of folds apart for some reason. So I'm not quite sure whether it's not quite sure how it's been sorted or arranged. But anyway, you have your plugin type, the component, the module component, the Frankenstein component name, the pathway it needs to live, a little bit of a description, and the Moodle version in which it was introduced. So it's quite a useful one to come and look at before you decide what you're going to do when somebody approaches you for a plugin development, or you've been asked to do a plugin development. Look at this to work out the best place to put your plugin. and then this will give you the information as to where you go looking for maybe examples, etc. So some of the, I'm going to just scroll down the page, but I'm not going to talk about every single plugin. I'll just pick out ones that sort of catch my eye and say something about it. So for example, here we did a feedback plugin. The assignment plugins, like I mentioned earlier, I believe are going to be areas where there will be more work being done in Moodle. So we've got down, so we'll go down the list. LTI, I mentioned again. I think there's a future expansion in that area. We've mentioned forum reports, quiz reports, SCORM reports, and these access rules are all sub-modules for the relevant modules. Then you've got some stuff on workshops, and we'll keep going down. We've got question import export formats. Might be somewhere where like the quiz stuff might actually be something that will grow, maybe it won't, but I do feel that there's going to be more emphasis on trying to make activities and questions more intuitive, I suppose. Then we've got your plugins, your editor plugins to control text edits. So we'll keep going down. We've touched on quite a few of those: log stores, course formats, data formats, reports, the gradebook stuff that I talked about earlier. Web services, always going to be an area where people will be looking to do stuff, and even the repositories might be a place that potentially will continue to see things being done. And we keep going down. Themes I touched on, local plugins. Now down here you get the later stuff that I was talking about in terms of more interesting content, activities, etc., with HP libraries being of particular interest. There is talk that it might not actually stay in Moodle core because there seems to be some issue in integrating the two separate applications, but we shall see. But it is certainly an interesting addition to Moodle in the later versions. Then you've got content banks and question bank plugins. So those are new stuff there. If you got another version of Moodle and you want to make sure you know whether that version supports the plugin you want to develop, there's a little script there to help you determine what plugins are being supported by that particular version that you need to work with. Okay, and then there's other stuff in this page that is useful for you to know. Okay, so this is the plugins directory, and in here you can come and look for plugins for any kind of purpose. You can choose a type of plugin if you know what you're looking for. There's even more information. You can do search for only for particular versions, etc. I'll just make that less, or you can just do a text search. Okay, right. I make it a point of coming and having a look at this before I take on any work. So if somebody approaches me for work to develop a plugin for them, I first come along here, or I point them here and tell them to have a look here and see if there's somebody already doing what they need to do. Now sometimes they'd find something similar, but it doesn't quite do what they want to do, and then we have a good starting point. We can start from where the shortfall is in the particular plugin and try and add on to that in a sense. Okay, so you can get by relevance, by sites, downloads, etc. These are kind of filters that you want to use, and then you just go into find let's say a plugin. If you click on it, you get to you can download it for the current version. It tells you what versions the plugin is supported. This is not a very good one. Let's see if we can find one that will give us a little bit more information when we look at it. Let's try that one, see if that's any good. So let's see versions. Yeah, so you can see along here this plugin's been updated time and time again over the years, and supports, and they've had to make changes for just about every major version of Moodle here. So each one is kind of different, but they're maintaining it. You have a description of the plugin, what it does. You get screenshots if there's any screens in it, so you can look at that as well. You find out who the contributors are, the awards that they've had, and any potential privacy issues. And you can look at the stats for the plugin, how many times it's been downloaded, or number of sites using the plugin, by Moodle version, etc., download stats and what have you. So, and then you've got your translations, which we'll talk about a little later on. So you might be saying, let's go back to, you might be saying, who are all these people who maintain all these plugins? Well, many organizations, such as the UK's Open University and a few partner organizations, not only contribute to the Moodle core, but they also release plugins in this plugins directory for the wider community. So alongside the ones that are done by Moodle partners and open universities, quite a lot of these are released by individuals, some working for companies that allow them to do open source work maybe once a week or something like that. Others, people who have developed the plugin and have maintained it for years, right? And if you yourself decided you've got a nice plugin that you want to actually release into the plugins directory, you can do so. Okay, so be warned that if you do release your plugin to the plugins directory, there is a time commitment that you have to make, and that means maintaining your plugin, checking it against versions, like the one when we looked at this plugin. We looked at the versions, and you could see there's every version. Then you have to make an effort to ensure that your plugin continues to work, especially if you've got people using it out there. Okay, and then Moodle tries to encourage plugin developers to keep on top of this, and they award badges for privacy considerations, automated testing support, and they even have an early bird award for those plugins that are ready at the time when the new version of Moodle comes out. Okay, so if you find yourself with an issue in terms of time, there is a way out, and that's through the plugins adoption program. And this basically is where you find yourself in a situation where you are maintaining a plugin and then find yourself without the time to continue to maintain it. And what you can do is put your plugin up for adoption to be maintained by a different user, a different developer. Okay, in reverse, you can look out and adopt existing plugins that are no longer being maintained. So there are some rules about being a maintainer. You can apply to be a maintainer, some plugin rules for maintainers, right? And then some notes. And you can force adoption where a plugin is not being maintained, and it might be a little bit of a shortcut if you want to get yourself into the plugins directory in adopting an existing plugin that's not really being maintained for the latest versions. So this is the plugin contribution page, and this gives you information about releasing your plugin or contributing plugin to the directory. Okay, So they have several benefits of that. Before you start, look at the stuff tracker, documentation, screenshots, etc. that are required. There's a flow chart here to explain how it kind of works. The language pack is quite an interesting thing, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. So automatically register the English strings, and then the strings get well, I don't know if it's automatically or the people who actually go through and translate your strings into other languages. We'll talk about that in a little while. And then you have your things like repository management, tracker, tutorials if you need them, and stuff like that. So this is the main page that gives you the high-level process for submitting your plugin. So one of the things that come up when you talk about contributing to the plugin directory is Amos. And Amos, we'll talk about that in a sec, helps with the translation of strings, of language strings. Okay, so this is the Amos page, and it's mainly aimed at people who are actually doing the translation. I don't think it says automated manipulation of strings, but I don't think it's really automated. I think people have to make an effort to actually do translations, and I'm not sure whether plugin language strings are automatic or somebody picks them up, or you have to organize to get your plugins strings translated. But it's worth having a look through that, especially if you are developing in a different language and you want to be able to take advantage of the translation of strings. I might try and do a YouTube video or something in the future looking specifically at how this whole system works. Okay, this is the next page. We've looked at this page before. This is the page where you come to make sure that you have your plugin will have a good chance of being accepted. Okay, so it says before approaching Moodle directory and submitting, you're encouraged to go through the checklist below and fix these things. Now, we've touched on this before when we were looking at testing, because there was nothing here that said testing, automated testing, BHAT or PHP unit testing needed to be done or included with your plugin. So, but there are other things that are required, and if you stick, there's a whole section on coding. If you stick to the development guidelines, the Moodle development guidelines, as we've been saying throughout the course, then this part of it shouldn't be an issue for you. And if you use the tools, code checker and the PHP doc checker, the Moodle doc checker, you're most likely going to not need to worry about any of those things. Security might be something else completely, but definitely in terms of coding. Then there's some more guidelines or checkpoints that you need to go through and make sure your plugin meets those requirements. So this seems to be quite a long page, but it's short paragraphs under each of those headings. So worth having you definitely will have to look at it before you try and get your plugin accepted by the plugin directory. And a lot of that, again, similar to our coding style, and there's even a link in there. Okay, so that's worth looking at if you want to contribute to the plugins directory. Now, there is some information to help you as you're waiting, because unfortunately there's a process, and sometimes the process can be a bit long, and sometimes plugins do take some time to get approved and allowed into the directory. There doesn't seem to be a pattern as to whether it's a new one or an updated plugin as to how quickly the approval comes through. So on this page here, there's a queue status. So we've got what's this? How many? 3 plugins that have been waiting in the approval queue for over 76 days. But I think a lot of them get done in a couple of weeks, but I'm not sure because I haven't gone through this process. But anyway, that's useful to know. So you know, if you do release a plugin, there's a chance that it may take up to 76 days before you get the initial feedback. So that's it for talking about releasing your plugin. I hope you found that interesting. I hope it actually helps you if you do decide to go down the route. Just as a word of note, if you're a brand new Moodle developer and you really want to get into it, it might be worthwhile doing a nice, well done, maybe even simple plugin and get it into the plugin directory that proves to anybody you approach or any employer that you've actually got the skills to actually develop Moodle plugins. And saying that, that now gives us an opportunity to look at the couple of forums that will be useful to you as a Moodle developer. So I will start with the Moodle jobs board. First thing to note is that I don't think agencies are allowed to post in this job board. So for one, you don't have to deal with agencies, filling up the space with jobs that might be of no interest, or reaching out just to get people onto their books. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the quality of the advertisements in the forum is not consistent. You get really good ones, usually where you've got organizations such as universities and Moodle partners looking for developers. Normally you'd have a good advert in the forum and you'd have a link to actually go and look at the more information on their websites. In other parts, you get people who are just asking for a little bit of help and posting, I need help with the report, and that's about the amount of information you get. Okay, so let's flick through a few. So this is in a different language. I think this is in German. Okay, let's look at another one. So that's a fairly good one. We've got a little bit of more information there, quite a good one, I would think. And then you have more, and there you have it, things like apply here and search there, etc. So it is quite a useful place to find work. Okay, but again, like I said, the quality of the advertisements will really depend on who's posting the advertisement. Okay, the other thing you need to remember is that sometimes people are restricted to being in the country or the country in which the job is. Now, it seems a bit weird, internationally available talent to anybody who wants it, but particularly the United States companies and organizations, and they tend to forget to actually specify in their adverts that they are only looking for people who are based in the United States. It seems to be an issue that everyone just assumes everybody works in the United States. But the thing is that if you see adverts for a company or work to be done in the United States and there's not much information in there, I would suggest you drop the person an email and actually ask them whether they're willing to consider people outside of the United States or whichever country. So it's worthwhile remembering that. It's particularly, I'm pointing out at the US because that particularly is where that happens. The vast majority of other ones will say they don't care where you are, and as long as you fit into like the time zone, sometimes that's the requirement, and that kind of stuff. So it's worth checking to see whether especially when they say remote, make sure that they are willing to consider you in the country that you are operating from. But otherwise, this is a useful, I have picked up a couple of jobs on the jobs board. So I keep an eye on it. I subscribe to the feed, and I get the jobs coming through in my RSS application, my news feed application. So worthwhile thinking about. So the other useful forum is the General Developer Forum. Now, if you are doing Moodle development and you certainly want to be part of this, because if you hit any problems, this is where you're going to find the Moodle experts, people who have been doing Moodle for a long time, people who've worked for Moodle headquarters itself, people who have worked for Moodle partners for a long time. Well, sometimes you have people who've worked for headquarters, have moved to partners, and continue to play a big role in the Moodle community. A few of the partners actually allow the developers time to work on things like plugins, or to take part in things like events, and to take part in communicating via things like the discussion forum. So in here, you've got people of all sorts. You've got pure developers, you've got people who are sort of developers, or kind of more on the admin side of things. But the vast majority of people in here are developers, or people who are looking at, who control or work with developers, Moodle developers. And there's a lot of experts in here. There's me there a few days ago, actually helping out, and I sometimes ask questions. I do more responding to questions, but I do ask questions for the more complicated stuff that I struggle with. For example, the testing stuff, I still have questions as I try and develop that skill. Okay, so this is a really useful place for forum. Now, I know you say, well, there's LinkedIn groups and there's Facebook groups and whatever, but if you really want to catch the experts, this is where you need to come. Okay, and the other areas are useful to help point people who don't really know about this forum, to point them here and get them to ask their questions here, where they're more likely to get a proper answer to their questions. So, useful place, and I would sincerely recommend you actually sign up for the forums and actually get involved. You learn a lot even by just keeping track of the conversations that are going on in this forum. Okay. For my part, I've been awarded the particularly helpful Moodler badge for 2020 and for 2021. Here's to 2022, for assisting people in the forum as such, and I'm fairly proud of that. Just before we go, here's a couple of links. They are in the lesson, pointing you to our notification sign up. We will be notifying you of changes or things that are of use to you for the book or the course. So, for example, when Moodle 4.0 comes out, we will be reviewing the examples we've used and seeing if there's any issues, and if they are, and what kind of things may have changed or you need to change for Moodle 4.0. We'll probably do a proper refresh of the course at least when 4.1 comes out, currently scheduled for November 2022. Then there's also a link to our YouTube channel, where at the moment there's not a lot of content because we've been concentrating on producing this course, but now that the course is done and it's out there, we will be producing much more content around things that we didn't quite touch in this course or in the book for the channel. Okay. So that is it for lesson 12 and for the course. So in this lesson, we developed a radio button radio buttons custom course field. We did a roundup of the plugins and APIs we've looked at during the course. We looked at the other plugins that are available. We've talked about publishing or releasing your plugins via the plugin directory, and we've had a look at the Moodle jobs and Moodle developer forums. Okay, and that is it for the course. I would like to really thank you for taking the course. I hope it's proved to be useful, and I hope it will prove to be a great investment for you. I look forward to maybe communicating with you sometime online, and I say good luck and have fun.